What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at the Naked Gun 2, the Smell of Fear. Let's waste no time, let's talk about it. When comparing Naked Gun 2 to Naked Gun 1, I think Naked Gun 2 is not as strong as the first movie, but that's not to say that the second movie is a bad movie, because it's not. I still think that Naked Gun 2 does have a couple of good bits in it, and it does expand on a character that I kind of enjoyed in the first movie. We get to see more of him in this movie. If I do have complaints, I think the overall story and villain of the movie is extremely weak when compared to that first movie. So let me get my positives out of the way first. Once again, Leslie Nielsen returns as the character of Frank Drebin, and just like he was in that first movie, he is excruciatingly hilarious in this movie. Leslie Nielsen fits the character of Frank Drebin to an absolute perfection. He is great in the role. Even if the movies that he's in are just not good, you at least know Leslie Nielsen's going to give it his all. And in this movie, it is no different. Frank Drebin is just an iconic comedic character brought to life by an accomplished actor in Leslie Nielsen. I have no complaints about Leslie Nielsen's performance in this movie. I thought he was just fine. George Kennedy returns as the character of Ed Hawken. He was really good in the movie as well. We get a lot more of his character and him and Frank working together, along with the character of Nordberg, played by O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson actually has a lot more to do, and actually has a lot more funny bits in this movie that I thought were really good. Especially this one bit where he's trying to put a tracking device on a car, and his glows gets caught, and he ends up he ends up underneath a bus that goes to Detroit. But before that, he constantly is getting hit with a bunch of objects because he can't get himself loose. I thought O.J. Simpson in this movie was really funny, and it made up for his lack of screen time in the first movie, in my opinion. Priscilla Presley once again returns as the character of Jane. In this movie, Frank and Jane are split up, and Jane is hanging around with yet another villainous person. One of the negative number one. Frank and Jane, did we really have to have them split up in the sequel just to force them back together again? Why couldn't we have just had Frank and Jane already together at the start of the film without the whole thing of Jane being with this evil business tycoon? Wouldn't it have been more interesting if Frank and Jane were already together at the start of this movie, and then Jane is slowly starting to be wooed by the Robert Goulet character of Quentin Habsburg, but she ultimately resists him? I think that would have made for some comedic bits instead of what we got already, instead of what this movie gave us. So yeah, not a big fan of Frank and Jane already being split at the start of the movie, but uh, but Nielsen and Presley still have really good on-screen chemistry, and the whole parody of the scene from Ghost with the whole clay creating thing was absolutely hysterical. So even though I don't like the whole idea of them being split, they do have some funny moments. Uh, now let's get to the overall negatives. The big negative I have of this movie is the villain. No disrespect to Robert Goulet, I honestly thought he put in a solid enough performance, but the character of Quentin Habsburg, he's just kind of boring when compared to Ludwig from the first movie, and his whole plan to pretty much to destroy the environment by having a decoy take the place of a prominent doctor that Jane is working with at the start of the film is very just boring and kind of stupid. Not only that, this whole movie seems to be a social commentary on pretty much politics, because this movie's plot line is very heavy on politics, particularly that of the George Bush Senior administration. I think in this case the Zuckers are pretty much doing a satire on George Bush's politics, and that's what this movie to me really is a pretty much a satire on the George Bush administration of the late 80s, early 90s. Now, I am not somebody that is very into politics or anything political like that. I think that's a big instance as to why the overall story of this movie just doesn't really resonate with me, because it can be a little too political heavy, especially since they're talking about the environment and stuff like that. With solar energy and fossil fuels. It's like, okay, the overall story and villain and the reasoning behind it, I think it's kind of boring. though the comedic bits are really funny, like uh, like with Drebin, Hawken, and Nordberg, and this Dr. Mannheim having to dress as mariachis, and they do this like this ridiculous performance in front of a crowd, which I thought was really hysterical. The whole bit of Drebin letting loose a bunch of zoo animals, I thought was funny, and the overall ending where the character of Quentin pretty much gets mauled down by a lion was funny to itself as well. So yeah, even though I don't think that Naked Gun 2 is as strong as the first movie, it still has some pretty good things to it, and I did overall get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Um, if anything, I think one of my favorite parts of this movie is kind of like this subplot of Drebin, Hawken, and Nordberg going after this assassin named Savage. I think I think all that stuff is funny, and that's where a lot of the comedic bits come from, including one where where Drebin visits Jane in her apartment, and Savage sneaks in, and then all of a sudden they start singing this romantic song in the bathroom. Jane and Savage does, but Jane does not know Savage is in the bathroom. Like I thought that scene was absolutely hilarious, and the police scene and the stakeout scene where Savage is barricaded himself in a house is also funny as well. So yeah, Naked Gun 2, it does have some good comedic bits thrown throughout there. But as an overall movie, I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. Well, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.